Hello, you with BBC News. I'm Karin Giannone. In the newsroom, we are bringing you the latest on the announcement in the last couple of hours by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, that £14.2 billion will be invested in the Sizewell C nuclear plant in Suffolk. That will provide electricity in 10 years' time. It is a 10-year project, but it's promised that it will provide thousands of jobs for the local area and will create enough energy for 6 million homes, the government says. The government's also saying it's investing in small modular reactors. They have announced a £2.5 billion investment for a programme in the East Midlands. But regulators granted a licence for Sizewell C nuclear reactor last year under the Conservative government, and it is being built by the state-owned French company EDF. Let's get some reactions to that announcement. We are waiting to hear from Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary. He'll be speaking to the Commons in about 15 minutes' time. But we can talk to Nick Tomkinson, who is Senior Partner at Global Nuclear Security Partners. He's in Bristol. Nick, just give us your thoughts on this announcement. What do you make of it?
UK and particularly, obviously, the nuclear industry. Nuclear energy is vital in terms of giving us dependable, low-carbon electricity that doesn't rely on the weather, isn't affected by international gas markets, global geopolitical instability. I think when both Hinkley Point C and Sizewell C are up and running, they'll provide enough electricity to power around 12 million homes. And that's more energy security for the country, fewer emissions, and greater price stability for households and businesses alike.
You mentioned Hinkley Point C in Somerset. That will switch on eventually in the early 2030s. That is over a decade late and costing billions of pounds more than the government at the time announced. Isn't this the most expensive kind of electricity you can buy?
It's expensive up front. Obviously, this is electricity that will continue to power or provide clean power for at least the next 60 years, maybe longer once it's up and running. It also supports thousands of jobs, revitalises supply chains. It strengthens Britain's long-term industrial base. And I think all the lessons that have been learnt at HPC will obviously be carried forward further into Sizewell C.
There are concerns that this is being entrusted to the French company EDF. What do you think of that part of the announcement?
I think EDF is the only operator with any experience in the UK. I think it makes perfect sense to continue with that. The whole point of nuclear is providing an element of stability and baseload. So trying to start out on a massive giga project with an organisation with no background doing it would feel like a mistake. So the continuation of EDF as the operator for these generating sites feels like the logical step.
When everybody wants carbon neutral, low carbon energy in its best form, shouldn't this vast sum of money be ploughed into areas like solar, like tidal? There are no safety concerns as such as there are about nuclear, and arguably it's a lot cheaper.
I think it's a balance. Nuclear energy is essential for cutting carbon emissions at scale. Wind and solar are vital, and we need a balanced grid, but we can't run the whole grid off wind and solar alone. Nuclear gives us a steady foundation 24 hours a day in all conditions.
OK, Nick, thank you very much. Nick Tomkinson, who's Senior Partner at Global Nuclear Security Partners there in Bristol. Let's hear what Dale Vince thinks. He's a British green energy industrialist and owner of the electricity company Ecotricity. What do you think of that, Dale Vince? Nuclear is a very steady, very reliable source that we need alongside all these other technologies.
Yeah, I think you nailed it when you pointed out that Hinkley was over a decade late, and I think it's like at 3 times its original budget. And this is the constant story of nuclear power. It always comes much later and at much higher cost than we expect. And you're right, it is the most expensive electricity we've ever known. It doesn't make sense. I think £40 billion invested in wind energy would give us 40% of our nation's need for electricity instead of the 7% that Hinkley will give us. It won't be on the grid in 2035, 2040 at the earliest, by which time we're meant to have got to 100% green electricity on the grid. That's the Labour target. So it doesn't make sense to me that we'd put all this money into Hinkley. In terms of jobs, it's going to cost £1.4 million for each of those 10,000 jobs boasted about in today's announcements. That's just bonkers.
But when the sun is not shining, as Nick Tompkinson was saying there, the country still needs a mechanism to provide dependable, reliable electricity. And this is the solution.
Well, I don't think it is a solution, and we can't. If we need that, what are we going to do until 2040? If we need Hinkley, what are we going to do in the gap? That doesn't make sense to me. There are 6 countries around the world now that are relying on the wind and the sun to power themselves almost entirely. Our national grid have said that we can be powered entirely with green energy. We've got a lot of solutions available to us on that front in terms of storage, the smart grid. And you mentioned tidal and technologies like that, which come in a super predictable, regular format that we can create almost baseload renewable energy from if we turn our minds to it.
What would you be suggesting to the government at this stage? I mean, do you think this is a done deal now? There's no stopping it.
No, I think you're right. It is a done deal. I think it's a huge waste of money, a huge sum of money, 14 billion. I think we threw 3 or 4 billion at it just 6 months ago. So, we're approaching 20 billion in total so far. Maybe EDF is stumping up the other half of the expected 40 plus billion. I don't know. But it does seem to be a done deal. I think it's unfortunate. There are so many better things that need money spending on them in our country. And this isn't going to hit the grid until 2040. I mean, that's a very long time away.
But, I mean, we're talking obviously about the costs, the upfront costs, the costs that are involved in getting it up and running. But once it is up and running, as Nick Tompkinson was saying there, it is efficient. It gives you what you need.
Look, it'll have a fixed price contract from the government under a new model of funding called the RAB. And that means that we'll be paying a premium for that electricity from the beginning of the construction period, which will be about 15 years. So before we have any electricity from it, we'll be paying more. And the lifetime of this project will see it produce the most expensive electricity that we've ever known. That's a fact.
Dale Vince, owner of the electricity company Ecotricity, thank you very much for your thoughts. Let's talk to Dr. Michael Rushton, who is a senior lecturer at the Nuclear Futures Institute at Bangor University. Michael Rushton, we've heard a very pro voice there, a not so pro voice. What do you make of it all?
I generally support the decision. It gives some certainty that we need to develop new nuclear power. It's got to be remembered that until about 2018, nuclear power was the UK's largest low-carbon generating source. And since then, our reactors have got older and older, and there's only so much you can extend their lives, and they've been gradually falling off the grid. So from its peak in the late 90s, where we had almost 20% of our electricity from nuclear, it's fallen a great deal from there. You can't just lose 20% of your generating capacity, so we need to replace it. And replacing it with something like nuclear is a good idea because it provides predictable baseload generation. There's also the announcement around the small modular reactors, which I think is also very positive.
Just explain for us the role of this small modular reactor. It may have been the first time today that people have heard this term and just announced £2.5 billion for that.
So the reactors at Hinkley Point and at Sizewell C are very, very large, right? As been stated, they generate almost 10% per construction project, 10% of the UK's electricity demand. That's a lot, but because it's so large, it also takes a long time to build, and it leads to these large construction costs. So what a small modular reactor does, it sort of addresses a lot of those concerns. You reduce the output of the reactor considerably, so we're talking more like 500 megawatts compared to 3,200 for the entire Hinkley Point C project. And by doing that, the components become smaller. And with those smaller components, you can build them in a factory. And by building them in a factory, you're less affected by weather delays. And when you come to build the thing, it gets delivered on the back of a series of trucks or by a barge or by train. And then you bolt them together on site under a large scaffolding tent so that the weather doesn't affect you as much. So you can take a lot of the uncertainty out of that. And by using a factory, you can reduce the costs because, we know factories are very effective at making the same thing again and again. But for that system, for a small modular reactor program to work, you need to build lots of them. So you need to do a program of construction.
You mentioned that there is a need for continuity. Everybody knows that there needs to be a dependable source of power. Are you suggesting that, green technologies alone cannot cover that entirely? There are always going to be times when you need an alternative source.
I think so. I think experience has shown. Now, there are a lot of countries that have invested heavily into renewables over the years, but if you look at the data in terms of their effectiveness in fully decarbonising their grid, the most effective countries have been those that have done a combination of maybe hydropower and nuclear. So you look across the channel to France, their electricity grid is largely decarbonised. You look at Sweden, similarly, hydro and nuclear. The trouble is, hydropower doesn't really scale very well and also is very sensitive to the effects of global warming. If a dam is not suitable for the type of rainfall you start getting, then it's very difficult to make it, to make it taller, for instance. So nuclear power is a geographically independent. You can deploy it in a much wider range of situations to provide the sort of low carbon and high outputs that you require to fully decarbonise a modern and large economy.
There will be people, perhaps people from older generations, who feel a sense of dread just hearing the term nuclear energy, given the disasters of the past in various places. What is the safety record like now? How much safer is nuclear in this modern age?
Well, nuclear power, how much more, how safe is it now? Well, in the UK, it's been incredibly safe. In civil nuclear power generation, we haven't really had any significant incidents. There was the Windscale fire, but that was associated with the nuclear deterrent of the 1950s. Well, in terms of the large accident in Chernobyl, that was a type of reactor that would never have been built here. Fukushima, that was caused by a tsunami of a type we don't get here. Nuclear power's safety record is incredibly good, and the engineering has only got better. The reactors that have failed and caused accidents were of a lot older. If you compare the safety of a car that you would have driven in the 1970s, when the most of the nuclear reactors that are currently being used were built, and then compare it to what you're driving now, you can see that engineering progress has been incredible over the past 40 or 50 years. And that's what we're talking about building now, a modern and incredibly safe reactor.
What is the record of the French company EDF, which is going to be involved in this?
Well, EDF runs one of the largest reactor fleets in the world in France. You just have to look at the experience in France. France is currently exporting electricity to the UK, and the reason it can do that is because EDF has successfully run a fleet of nuclear reactors, which means that it can sell electricity. It has a surplus, and on top of that electricity is incredibly green. It's very low carbon. So EDF is incredibly experienced in this. They also have been operating the nuclear reactors in the UK since the 1990s, when British Energy was sold to EDF. They stepped in and started operating the advanced gas-cooled reactors that we operate in this country. So there is a long history with EDF, and they know what they're doing.
This is going to be very expensive. Everyone agrees on that, and it is going to take a long time. What does that mean for the consumer?
Well, I think we have to look at what the alternative is if we don't do this. So I think recently, when we had the Ukraine energy shock, I think there was a realization that if we'd started building the nuclear power stations we said we were going to build around then, rather than using the same argument that we shouldn't build because it won't be ready in time, if we'd started 10 years ago, it would have been ready in time for the Ukraine energy shock, and it would have benefited the consumer considerably. We also have to factor in security of supply, and also guaranteeing a consistent price for our electricity. And that's something that nuclear brings because it's less sensitive to energy shocks. When the price of nuclear fuel doubles, the price of electricity doesn't double because it's not the major running cost of the power station. So it insulates you from a lot of the volatility in energy markets by going nuclear. It means that you can react to changes in increasing cost in a gradual fashion if you need to. But I think the tendency would be that if we can get more players in this space, if we can get nuclear working effectively and carry on, I think the trouble with nuclear is we build one, we stop, and we have a wringing of hands, and we have to rebuild the capability to build a nuclear power station every time we do one of these projects. If we were to continue and do, in a systematic and orderly fashion and build multiple reactors, we build one and then build the next and replace them in an orderly fashion, that would be the correct way to run a nuclear industry. And that's what they do in France. And they've been incredibly effective at decarbonising their electricity grid and providing low cost and non-volatile electricity prices.
Given the case of Hinkley Point C in Somerset, that will be over a decade late. It won't switch on until the early 2030s, and it is going to cost billions more than originally planned. How realistic do you think the government's figures, both in terms of the cost and the timescale, are?
So this type of reactor has been built elsewhere as well. So I think there have been difficulties building it in France as well at Flamanville. There's been delays there, and the first of the type in Finland was also problematic. However, if you look at a country like China, they managed to build these reactors in about 9 years. So that's about the time span that they're quoting for Sizewell C. I think that's doable because, again, the experience you've gained with Hinkley Point C, the builders who've done that, I'm sure they'll be involved in Sizewell C, and the way you manage the project, the way you sequence things, any problems they found there, they can learn from those experiences. There's a learning curve, and we have to benefit from the learning curve by doing it again, and we will benefit from the learning curve, and it should bring down the build times.
Just to remind anybody just joining us, we are waiting for the statement from Energy Secretary Ed Miliband. He's going to be speaking to the House of Commons any moment now. He is the Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero. We've already heard him talking to the Today programme on Radio 4, and we are, while we wait to hear from Ed Miliband, talking to Dr. Michael Rushton, who is Senior Lecturer at the Nuclear Futures Institute at Bangor University. And thank you for your patience in answering all these questions, Dr. Rushton. I just wonder what, in terms of the costs, it's difficult to know now, but will this all be public money? What's the role of private investment here?
Well, the intervention by the government is valuable because it considerably de-risks the project, so you can attract that private investment. So it will have, some of it will have to be private investment because at the moment that the amount that's been given to the project isn't enough to pay for the whole project. There's also the difference between a nuclear reactor under construction and an operating nuclear reactor. Once the thing's up and running, the financial risk greatly reduces because you've got an asset that is initially licensed for about 60 years, but will no doubt be able to run for 60, 80. Some people would even suggest up to 100 years. So you've got to put it into that context. This is an investment for the future. So there's also discussion of the regulated asset base model, the RAB, and things like that. So there is work to be done around nuclear financing to allow follow-on projects, and it'll be interesting to see what they do with the small modular reactors. The small reactors, of course, are a lot easier to invest in because the initial capital cost is a lot lower, the build time is lower, so you're not carrying that financial risk for the same amount of time. So it's an interesting space, but the investment by the government has allowed people to invest for what is a very long-term project.
You mentioned that France actually exports electricity to us because of its capacity. It has so much electricity, a lot of it produced by nuclear. What is the UK producing for itself in terms of nuclear-powered electricity?
So at the moment, we're at about 6.5 gigawatts. So that's just about the amount that will be produced by Hinkley Point C and Sizewell C when they're constructed. It used to be a lot larger, but as I said, the type of reactors we have, the advanced gas core reactors, they're gradually getting beyond the age where you can life extend them. So they will be falling off the grid into the 2030s, probably even before that. We're seeing that. So, for instance, places like Hunterston have already been closing down. So yeah, we're going to lose that 6.5 gigawatts of low carbon generation very shortly. So this announcement couldn't have come soon enough.
Dr. Michael Rushton, thank you for the moment, Senior Lecturer at the Nuclear Futures Institute at Bangor University. Thank you for the moment. Let's just remind you what we are waiting for. Ed Miliband, the Secretary of State for Energy, is going to give a statement to the House of Commons. This comes just an hour or so after Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, gave her announcement. She was speaking in Brighton at the GBU Union conference there, and she has announced £14.2 billion of investment in the Sizewell C nuclear plant in Suffolk. The government has confirmed that that will be happening. It will take at least a decade to complete. Keir Starmer, who was speaking at a college in Ipswich, not far from Sizewell in Suffolk, has said it will bring down people's energy bills once it is complete. But we have heard a lot of opposition to the amount of money that this is going to cost. £14.2 billion is the cost announced now. But with the example of Hinkley Point C, the reactor in Somerset that was announced decades ago, it is still not up and running, and it has cost billions more than it was originally announced, and it has taken far, far longer. So there is a lot of scepticism about the announcement actually meeting those targets in terms of costs and in terms of timescale. Chancellor Rachel Reeves earlier said it would be a new era of nuclear power in Britain, with Sizewell creating energy for 6 million homes. Now, Ed Miliband, we see he is answering questions in the House of Commons, but he's not giving a statement just yet. Let's just hear a little of what Rachel Reeves had to say earlier in Brighton.
And so because it is the right choice for jobs and for the cost of living, because it is the right choice for economic growth, and because it is the right choice for energy security, I can announce today to you that this Labour government is investing in the biggest rollout of nuclear power in a generation. This government is giving our full backing to the Sizewell C nuclear plant, providing £14.2 billion of additional funding for the first directly state-funded nuclear power station since 1988, producing the energy to power 6 million homes, employing 10,000 people, supporting thousands more jobs across the UK, including 1,500 apprenticeships, and putting hundreds of millions of pounds into the supply chain. And that's not all, Congress. Because this government backs British innovation, and because the potential for faster, cleaner, cheaper energy is there, we will be backing new small modular reactors, investing in that technology and in the rapid deployment of fusion technology, backing our world-leading fusion plant in Nottinghamshire, providing a route for private sector-led advanced nuclear projects to be deployed here in the UK, bringing those jobs to Britain. The International Energy Agency estimates that the small modular reactor market will be worth up to £500 billion by 2050. So if we want those jobs, we want that wealth, and we want to lead the world, then we must act today. And we are. To start, that means investing £2.5 billion to enable one of the world's first small modular reactor programmes, supporting 3,000 jobs in the East Midlands in the process. A first step towards our ambition for a full fleet of small modular reactors across our country.
So that was Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, speaking this morning earlier about the new announcement for the Sizewell C nuclear power plant in Suffolk. That announcement of £14 billion to be invested, promising it will be a creator of 10,000 jobs and deliver what she calls a golden age of clean energy. But there are a lot of critics. Some say that ministers aren't being honest about the total cost of the plant based on previous examples like Hinkley Point C in Somerset, which has been way over budget, and other objections that this money should be put put into power like tidal and solar and other green energies. Our business editor, Simon Jack, reports.
Nuclear energy has been produced here in Sizewell for nearly 60 years. Today, the Chancellor will confirm she's setting aside money to build a new generation of reactors to generate energy for decades to come. The plan is to take the design under construction at Hinkley Point in Somerset and replicate it on the Suffolk coast, ushering in what the government describes as a golden age of nuclear to boost the UK's energy security. Sizewell C's construction, it says, will create 10,000 direct jobs and once complete will produce enough energy to power 6 million homes. The government has earmarked £14.2 billion towards the cost over the next 4 years. But it will take much longer than that to build, and the total budget could be as much as £40 billion. One reason, but not the only one, objectors say it's a costly mistake.
There is £14.2 billion of taxpayers' funding, and that's a decision we condemn and firmly believe the government will come to regret. We don't see the benefit for voters in ploughing more money into Sizewell C that could be spent on other priorities, and when the project will add to consumer bills during construction and is guaranteed to be late and overspent just like Hinkley Point C.
The government is lining up private investors to share the final costs and insists nuclear provides low-carbon, non-intermittent energy and is an essential part of the UK's future energy mix. There's also money to develop smaller reactors and fund research into other nuclear technology. This government is not the first to declare a golden age for nuclear, and it'll be over a decade before the electricity produced is there at the flick of a switch. Simon Jack, BBC News, Suffolk.
Now, we're just watching the Commons chamber because we think Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary, is about to get to his feet for the statement, and he is. Let's listen in.
In 2009, as Energy Secretary, I delivered a statement to this House identifying potential sites for new nuclear. Back then, I said we need to use all available low-carbon sources. New nuclear is right for energy security and climate change, and it will be good for jobs too. Mr. Speaker, that was true back then, and it is even more true today. Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the cost of living crisis that followed showed how vulnerable we are as a country because of our dependence on fossil fuels, at the whim of markets controlled by petrostates and dictators. Now, the imperative of energy security and the demands of the climate crisis mean we must shift as fast as possible to clean, homegrown power. And, Mr. Speaker, the demand for that power, as we shift away from gas, is expected to at least double by 2050. So we need all the low-carbon sources we can to meet the demands we face. And the advice from experts, including the Climate Change Committee, is clear. We need new nuclear to meet our climate obligations. So, Mr. Speaker, this government supports new nuclear because of our belief that the climate crisis is the greatest long-term threat facing our country and our world, not in spite of it. Because of the imperative of energy security and also because of the good skilled jobs that nuclear provides. In Britain today, there are too few industries that offer the secure, well-paid jobs with strong trade unions that the British people desire and deserve. I have heard time and again, Mr. Speaker, from people up and down the country about the importance of nuclear jobs to their communities. For all these reasons, the government is taking decisive steps today to usher in a new golden age of nuclear for Britain. First, back in the late 2000s, I identified Sizewell as a potential site for new nuclear when I was Energy Secretary. Mr. Speaker, it's taken 16 years, but I'm incredibly proud that we are today announcing £14.2 billion of our public funding for this spending review period to build Sizewell C, the first government-funded and owned nuclear power station in Britain since the 1980s. A strategic partnership with France, with EDF, intending to invest alongside us. I want to recognise the contribution of my honourable friends for Lowestoft and Ipswich in advocating for this project, and also my honourable friend for Warrington North for her advocacy for nuclear as a whole. I also acknowledge he's not here, but the work of the honourable member for West Aberdeenshire and Kincardine as nuclear minister. Mr. Speaker, Sizewell C will power the equivalent of around 6 million homes with clean homegrown energy for 60 years. And it will be a jobs and growth engine for Britain, supporting 10,000 jobs at peak construction and creating 1,500 apprenticeships. well-paid, highly skilled jobs in East Anglia and communities across the country. And I want to thank the GMB, Unite and Prospect trade unions, who are brilliant champions for the nuclear industry. Mr. Speaker, Sizewell has already signed £4.2 billion worth of contracts with 311 companies and eventually will work with 3,500 suppliers in all 4 nations of the UK. And I will also say to the House, this project is good value for money for the taxpayer because there will be a clear economic return on the investment, and for the bill payer because all the due diligence we have done demonstrates that the cost of the clean power supplied will be cheaper than the alternative. Mr. Speaker, we expect the final investment decision on the project, including through the capital raise from the private sector, to be completed in the summer, when we will set out further detail. Mr. Speaker, a new generation of nuclear power, promised for years, delivered by this Labour government. Second, small modular reactors offer a huge industrial opportunity for our country. We're determined to harness Britain's nuclear expertise to win the global race to lead in this new technology. I can inform the House that following a rigorous 2-year competition, today Rolls-Royce SMR has been selected as the preferred bidder to develop the UK's first SMRs, subject to final government approvals and contract signature. This initial project could create up to 3,000 skilled jobs and power the equivalent of around 3 million homes. And in the spending review, we are committing to the public investment needed to get this project off the ground, with over £2.5 billion of funding for the SMR programme over the spending review period. It will be delivered by a publicly owned company, Great British Energy Nuclear, headquartered in Warrington, an allied company to Great British Energy, headquartered in Aberdeen. Subject to government approvals, the contract will be signed later this year. Our aim is to deliver one of Europe's first SMR fleets, leading the world in the nuclear technologies of the future. More good jobs and energy security funded and made possible by this Labour government. Third, beyond the immediate horizon, nuclear fusion offers the potential of an energy-abundant future. Britain already leads thanks to the pioneering work of the UK AEA. But unlike in the past, we're determined to make the investments to stay ahead as a country. So today we are pledging to invest more than £2.5 billion in nuclear fusion, including the STEP programme. This will help progress a new prototype fusion plant at West Burton. I congratulate the Mayor of the East Midlands, Claire Ward, for her tireless advocacy of this project, as well as my honourable friends, the members for Bassett Law and Rushcliffe, for their advocacy too. This will be the first fusion plant of its kind in the world on the site of a former coal-fired power station. Britain leading the clean energy transition and trailblazing the technologies of the future under a Labour government. Fourth, our nuclear ambitions do not stop there. As we move ahead on these projects, we see huge potential right across the country. That's why we're looking to provide a route for private sector-led advanced nuclear projects, AMRs and SMRs, to be deployed in the UK. And we will task Great British Energy Nuclear with a new role in assessing proposals, with the National Wealth Fund exploring potential investment opportunities. My message to the private sector is, if you want to build new nuclear, Britain is open for business. And I can also tell the House that following the incredible campaigning work of my honourable friends for Whitehaven and Workington, Carlisle, Penrith and Solway and Barrow-in-Furness, my department has asked the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority and Cumberland Council to consider the potential for privately led clean energy development in Moorside, delivering jobs and growth in Cumbria. We also know, Mr. Speaker, this is an industry that demands long-term thinking. So having announced these steps today, we will build on our 2030 Clean Power Action Plan and set out our plans for the energy system into the 2030s and beyond, including our ambitions and next steps on nuclear. Mr. Speaker, taken together, the steps I have announced today will kick off the biggest nuclear building programme Britain has seen in half a century, doubling down on our nuclear strength to take the latest step forward in our mission to make Britain a clean energy superpower. And when people ask what clean energy and net zero means for our country, this is what it is all about. For too long, our country has not made the crucial energy or indeed other infrastructure investments we need. A short-sighted failure to invest, for which the British people have paid the price in lower living standards, insecurity and declining public services. This week's announcements signal a decisive change in approach. To invest in the future, the right choice for energy security, the right choice for jobs, the right choice for climate and our children and grandchildren, the right choice for Britain, investment not decline. This government has made its choice, and I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Minister Nick Timothy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for advance sight of his statement. The Conservative Party is a pro-nuclear party, and we welcome any decisions backed by investment that increase Britain's nuclear capacity. We cannot deliver cheap, reliable and secure energy without it. While the investment announced by the Secretary of State today is significant, it is a fraction of the £230 billion cost of his plan to decarbonise the grid, which will ultimately be borne by consumers. Unlike the intermittent technologies backed at such cost by the Secretary of State, nuclear provides reliable baseload power. It generates inertia to stabilise our grid. And nuclear power plants require substantially less new grid infrastructure than dispersed generation by wind and solar. It's to the shame of successive governments over many years that Britain relinquished its status as a world leader in civil nuclear technologies. In 1965, we had more nuclear reactors than the United States, the USSR, and the rest of the world put together. Between 1956 and 1966, we built 10 nuclear power stations in a decade. But we gave all of that up. The contribution of nuclear to our power generation peaked in 1994 and has fallen consistently since then. Labour came to power in 1997, saying we see no economic case for the building of any new nuclear power stations. In 2010, the coalition agreement ruled out public investment in nuclear. It was the last Conservative government that planned the largest revival of nuclear power in 70 years, and it is thanks to this work that the Secretary of State has been able to make many of these announcements today. But can he reiterate, despite the headlines this morning, that the final investment decision is not yet made? He said in his statement that he will announce it in the summer, but can he give us a more precise date when we will be told the total government investment and the private capital raised? This statement is a downgrade on what the last government put in motion. Today, the Energy Secretary has announced only one small modular reactor. There is no clear target to increase nuclear power generation and no news on Wilver. The nuclear industry is expecting news of a 3rd gigawatt scale reactor. The last government purchased the land and committed to build, but on this today, the Energy Secretary said nothing. So can he commit to the plan he inherited for a 3rd gigawatt scale plant at Wilver? And will he recommit to the Conservative policy of 24 gigawatts of nuclear power by 2050? While it's good news that Rolls-Royce will build our first small modular reactors, this is a downgrade on what was previously planned. So can he tell us why he has awarded just one technology rather than two that were set out before? And will he commit, as other countries have, to going faster? Canada has approved a plan for 4 SMRs by 2029. As things stand, Britain will not have SMRs connected to the grid until the 2030s. The contrast between this caution on nuclear and the government's rush to decarbonise the entire grid in just 5 years, while betting the house on unreliable and intermittent renewable technologies and shutting down British oil and gas in the North Sea, couldn't be clearer. We need the Energy Secretary to focus on the possible, not stake our country's future and people's bills on ideology.
I feel a bit sorry for the honourable gentleman, because it's kind of hard on a day like this to be a member of the opposition. Nevertheless, I'll try and answer his questions such as they are. On the question about final investment decision, he will maybe be aware that we're currently doing the private sector capital raise. When that is complete, we will proceed to final investment decision, which, as I say, will take place this summer, and that is obviously important. On the fundamental question that he's sort of asking, I mean, I do sort of slightly scratch my head, but because, you know, he sort of says it's a downgrade. I mean, we've announced the largest nuclear building program in 50 years. I mean, it might have sort of looked good in the mirror this morning, but I think it looks sort of doesn't really bear much resemblance to reality. And look, the question is this, Mr. Speaker, and it goes to the point I was making at the end of my statement. Why did they make all these promises on nuclear but fail to deliver them? And there's a simple answer. It wasn't because of the lack of diligence of his honourable friend, the member for Aberdeen and West Kincardine. It was for a simple reason, which is they didn't put the money up. They didn't make the investment. And look, this is the point here. What is the thing that has bedeviled the nuclear programme? A failure to invest public money. And look, we're putting 14 billion for Sizewell in this spending review, 2.5 billion for SMRs, 2.5 billion for fusion. I mean, that is significant sums of long-term capital investment. And that's what they didn't do. That's why they made all these promises. That's why I was the guy that identified Sizewell, and I'm back being the guy delivering Sizewell. It's because we're willing to make the investments. So, you know, we welcome support such as it is from him, but he needs to learn some lessons. Public investment, not decline, is the answer for Britain.
Thank you very much,
Mr. Speaker. Can I warmly congratulate my right honourable friend on delivering on his promise from 2009 in delivering the confirmation of Sizewell C today, along with a vast array of commitments to a bright nuclear future for this country. The Select Committee looks forward in our inquiry into the future of nuclear in the autumn, taking evidence and making recommendations to support the work the Secretary of State has set out. We visited Sizewell C. I've also visited the Nuclear Physics Department at Liverpool University and learned in both cases about the jobs that will be available right across this country. But can the Secretary of State confirm that he sees this as just the start both for gigawatt construction of new nuclear and also the start of a big expansion in what is still a nascent technology in SMRs and also in AMRs for a very, very good future for nuclear generation in this country?
My honourable friend speaks very well on this subject, and I agree with what he said, both about the huge jobs potential from new nuclear, and also just on the sort of timelines here. Look, my priority when we came into office was to get these things over the line, because there'd been so many promises made by the last government which didn't, you know, they made these long-term promises, Boris Johnson, for 2050, but didn't actually deliver anything towards the 24 gigawatt target. So my priority, get on and deliver these things, get them over the line, which we're doing, and then look, and this is why I said at the end of my statement, look at what are the energy needs going forward and how do we meet them. And I agree with him that I think nuclear has a really essential part to play in this. And, you know, alongside all the other clean energy technologies, we need all of them. You know, electricity demand is going to double by 2050. We need all of them.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Pippa Haley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we welcome the government's renewed focus on energy security through nuclear power as part of the energy mix. It's long overdue after years of dither and delay from successive Conservative governments. It's been 16 years since Sizewell C was first announced in 2009. And now, 7 Prime Ministers later, we're finally seeing real movement. That's not a success story. It's a warning. Short-term thinking, poor delivery, exorbitant costs. And I can't help but wonder, when the Secretary of State... Can I continue? Can I continue?
Sit down, please. I decide, and I will decide when things are out of order. I don't need any help, because I want you to get it finished quickly. Come on, Pippa Haley.
I can't help but wonder, when the Secretary of State stood at his dispatch box back in 2009, did he imagine he'd be back in 2025 still announcing funding for the same project? We support investment in clean, homegrown energy. Small modular nuclear reactors have real potential to reduce our dependence on foreign gas from tyrants like Putin and help bring down bills. So we welcome the government backing this nascent technology of small modular reactors and the choice of Rolls-Royce, who's really recognised as a first mover across all of Europe. And that's where the focus should be, rather than large-scale projects like Sizewell C that cost billions, takes decades and goes over a budget. So we have to make sure this doesn't land consumers with higher energy bills. That risk is very real. The government must be transparent about how this will be paid for, because families can't afford another hit to their household budgets. Liberal Democrats believe the best way to cut bills, create good jobs and boost energy security is invest in homegrown renewables, solar, wind, tidal, geothermal, upgrade our national grid to deliver that clean power. And on that point, Mr. Speaker, we look forward to seeing more detail on the long overdue reform of the outdated first come, first served grid connection system, holding back renewable energy projects, could even delay the rollout of new SMRs. So today's announcement is a step in the right direction. The real test of delivery, cheaper bills, stronger energy security and a modern energy grid for the future. Thank you.
I thank the Honourable Lady for her contribution. She has sort of slightly airbrushed out the role of the current leader of the Liberal Democrats. I sort of feel a bit bad about mentioning this. Like the current leader of the Liberal Democrats, who was Energy Secretary for a period, but we'll sort of Trotsky that out of the to use a sort of familial sort of term of origin. We'll Trotsky it out of the record. On the other points that she makes, look, I really sincerely welcome her support for this programme, and I think she puts it very, very well, and I think it's actually a lesson to some of the people sitting behind her, which is we need all of these clean energy technologies. We shouldn't choose between them. Just because we're in favour of nuclear doesn't mean we're against wind. I'm the biggest enthusiast for offshore wind, for onshore wind, for solar, for all of these technologies. Let's have all of them to get off fossil fuels and meet our electricity and energy demands.
Mr. McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and happy birthday. The year of your birth was only a few months after the opening of Calder Hall, the world's first civil nuclear power plant. So you share that birthday. And on that point, the Secretary of State has made a major decision, which is incredibly welcome in West Cumbria, which is to unlock up to 200 acres of land at Moorside for clean energy projects, including new nuclear. This has been an issue that's been stuck for many, many years, and I really welcome the Secretary of State's efforts and the decision that he made and the work that he's done with the Cumberland Nuclear Future Board to make it happen. The first question really is, will the Secretary of State continue to work with myself and local partners to drive that through so that we actually get something delivered at the site? And secondly, can he say a bit more about the regulatory task force that's being undertaken at the moment so that we can cut through the bureaucracy and build reactors quicker?
To reassure you, Mr. Speaker, you look much younger than the Calder Hall nuclear power station.
And it's been decommissioned. That's even worse.
Absolutely right. There's no decommissioning of you, Mr. Speaker. Right. On the... can I seriously really congratulate my honourable friend? He has shown incredible leadership for the people of his constituency and his area on this issue. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with him and colleagues on these questions. He's absolutely right about the potential there is. He's absolutely right also on this regulatory question. We have some of the highest standards of regulation in the world, but it's always right to look at how we can improve the standards of regulation, avoid changes in regulation in the course of projects, which is absolutely crucial for success, and that's the work we're getting on with.
Rex.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Happy birthday. Credit where it is due, I totally welcome the announcement on nuclear today. Where I disagree with the Secretary of State is on his persistence to plough ahead with inefficient technologies like solar and associated paraphernalia like battery storage, which trashes the Buckinghamshire and wider British countryside. Nuclear works 24/7, solar works about 10% of the time. Will he have greater courage and plough ahead with this much more efficient 24/7 nuclear technology and drop solar?
Well, look, I thank you for part of what he said, if not most of it. Look, we just have a sort of fundamental disagreement. Solar, wind offer cheap power for our country, and why would we possibly say no to it? And the biggest threat to the countryside is the climate crisis, and this, alongside nuclear, is the way to tackle it.
Joe White.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I also wish you a happy birthday. And I very much welcome the statement today. It is about the future visioning and future proofing of our energy security and production. But I particularly welcome the £2.5 billion investment into fusion, including into the STEP programme at West Burton in North Nottinghamshire. I'd like to thank the work of the ministers to secure this. It's very, very welcome indeed. But the process has already started. The tender outcomes for the construction and design and technology will be announced later this year, and I'm championing British companies who are very much part of that process. Yeah. But I'm more excited by the thousands of jobs and skills and new infrastructure that will be developed because of this. The work has already started on the Skills Partnership, stretching right across the regions, including the East Midlands, Lincolnshire and South Yorkshire. And they're now working together with our further education colleges, our universities and the Advanced Manufacturing Centre in Rotherham. But would the Minister agree with me that it's investment in left-behind red wall areas like mine that need to be the places where we revise our energy and our industry? This is where we start, and I want to see more. So thank you very much.
Well, can I say to my honourable friend, can I thank her for her advocacy, and can I say that as I was in discussions with the Chancellor, I did think that if this didn't go ahead, I'd have to answer to her and to the Mayor of the East Midlands, and so she was a very motivating force in ensuring that the project did go ahead. But I think her point is absolutely crucial, which is this is about good jobs in areas of the country that really need those good jobs. I was talking to an apprentice last night from Sizewell, and just who'd gone to Sizewell at 16. She's been there a year, and just the experience she's had, the kind of credit she gives to Sizewell, and you could just see her career in front of her, and we want that for lots more people.
Sir Julian.
Assuming that both the large nuclear power station at Sizewell C and the small modular reactors both prove to be successful, as we trust they will be, what's the government's thinking about the respective roles of each of those two very different types? Which does he think would be the better bet in the long term for the future of the country? And can he assure us that China will have no part in any of this?
On the latter, yes, I can assure him of that. It was the typically astute question, if I may say so, from the honourable gentleman. Look, I think the truth about these technologies is that I think both is the answer, and I think we can't really make a judgment about this until we see the SMR programme develop. Look, the SMR programme offers something that has eluded nuclear for a long time, which is modularity and replication. And that is the way, as we know from other technologies, to bring down costs and speed up delivery. So I think there's huge potential to both, but large-scale gigawatt can also play an important role.
Louise Hay.
Speaker, can I warmly welcome the SMR announcement today, which is great news for Sheffield, as Rolls-Royce are already doing significant work at the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre. When I met Rolls recently, they said that 70% of their bid could be built and produced in Great Britain. How will the government make sure that they hold Rolls-Royce to account for that and ensure that this announcement delivers great jobs and great investment right across the UK?
Well, I really thank my right honourable friend for her incredible advocacy on this issue, including at the AMRC. I think she makes such an important point, which is this is going to be taxpayers' money, and we need to make sure that as much as possible of this is built in Britain. And I make absolutely no apologies for saying that. And the answer to her question is that as we negotiate terms with Rolls-Royce over the coming months, this will be an absolutely key part of our discussions.
Kirsty Black.
This £14 billion splurge on English nuclear power plants comes on top of £22 billion for English carbon capture and storage, while there's nothing for Scotland's Acorn project, with Grangemouth allowed to close, with a fiscal regime that is ruining North East energy jobs. This latest announcement shows that Scotland isn't just an afterthought. Scotland isn't a thought at all. If nearly £40 billion can be found for English energy projects, why is it that money's never been found for Scotland's carbon capture project?
Well, look, I think maybe there's an SNP change in position coming. If the Honourable Lady wants to have a discussion about Scottish nuclear power stations, then absolutely, we're in favour of the Acorn project, and we'll be saying more about this in the coming weeks. But let me just say to her, on nuclear power, they've really got to think again. They are absolutely sticking their heads in the sand when it comes to this. This is about jobs, it's about investment, it's about clean energy. They should really rethink.
Lizzie Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And if I'd known it was your birthday, I would have brought you a chorley cake down. Never mind. My constituency, as you know, Mr. Speaker, hosts Heysham 1 and 2 nuclear power stations, and as the Secretary of State is aware, I'm pushing for Heysham to host new nuclear too. So can the Secretary of State tell me how today's announcement supports nuclear communities like mine and enables the next generation of nuclear across the country?
Well, the Honourable Lady is absolutely right, and to go slightly to the weeds, the new planning framework we're consulting on opens up possibilities for new nuclear. And what I've said today is, we set out the public money that we can at this stage commit to new nuclear, but my message to the private sector is, and we're seeing this a bit in the US, we're seeing this a bit in other countries, 50% increase in nuclear investment last year globally. If the private sector are interested in partnering with us and coming to us and saying, look, we want to build in other places, other than the places where you've put the public investment, we're absolutely open for business and dialogue.
Sir John Whittingham.
The Secretary of State will be aware that it was originally proposed to build a third nuclear power station based on a Chinese design at Bradwell-on-Sea in my constituency. While it will not be Chinese, can he say whether or not a third station at Bradwell is still a possibility, or whether alternatively it could be a location for an SMR?
Look, good nuclear sites, including Bradwell, are always going to be possibilities as far as I'm concerned. We're not going to have China building our nuclear power stations, but if this is something that the honourable gentleman wants to discuss with my department, honourable gentleman, I beg your pardon, we'll be very happy to do so.
Claire Hughes.
It's clear that this Labour government is putting pounds behind promises to deliver clean energy and good skilled jobs in all parts of the country. So with that in mind, given its importance to North Wales, could my right honourable friend confirm that Great British Nuclear will confirm or prioritise Wilver?
I'm glad my honourable friend asked me this question. Wilver is an incredibly important site that has huge potential for our country, and obviously Great British Nuclear is going to be looking over the months ahead at the role that Wilver can play, both in relation to SMRs and in relation to large-scale nuclear.
Phyllis Maddy.
The Secretary of State's message to the private sector is, if you want to build new nuclear, that Britain is open. Companies have told me that they need decisive and committed leadership from the UK government to be confident to invest in a new project at Wilver. I have raised this 11 times in this chamber, yet today no mention of Wilver. So, can the Secretary of State make it clear that the UK government supports the delivery of new nuclear project at Wilver?
Yes, we do. And, again, I would say to the honourable lady that we are very open to discussions with her and other colleagues.
Clive Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I won't say happy birthday again. Perhaps we could just arrange to sing it next time so we all don't have to repeat it. But say to the Secretary of State, it's very welcome, his statement today, but the other welcome news today is the government's commitment for £460 million of investment at Sheffield Forgemasters. Primarily that's for defence nuclear, but it provides extra capacity for civil nuclear as well. So will my honourable friend commit that, a bit of concern that Rolls has got this link with Czechia, that they will now use the forgings from Sheffield Forgemasters in the first of its type SMR in this country and build the supply chain so the vast majority of jobs are actually provided for British workers?
Well, I thank my reverend for that question. Look, I definitely believe that Sheffield Forgemasters has an incredibly important role to play in our civil nuclear programme. So contractual details for Rolls-Royce and the discussions we have with them are for a bit down the road, but Forgemasters, in my view, is central to our plans.
Claire Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and happy birthday. Albury in my constituency is one of the sites under consideration for SMRs, and I've been told many times there are many factors going for it, including the fact that GBE Nuclear already own it, the nuclear expertise in higher education locally, its existing nuclear history, and the potential for coordination with the Berkeley site. Given that the old nuclear power station has already been decommissioned, the local community wants to know what the future looks like. So can the Minister confirm that Albury is still in the running and give a timeline for the decision?
So I thank the honourable lady for her question. As part of the process that we go to from here, Great British Energy Nuclear will be looking at what is the right place for the SMR fleet, and absolutely Albury is one of the candidates.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I refer the House to my register of business interests, and I also wish you a happy birthday and what a wonderful day today is proving to be. As a proud Derby MP, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome the selection of Rolls-Royce to deliver the first of the UK small modular reactors. We know the Secretary of State, all his ministerial team and the Mayor of the East Midlands are champions of clean energy jobs. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that the decision today is good news for the country, good news for Derby, and that backing homegrown SMRs, what will the benefit be to UK workers and in the region of the East Midlands?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his advocacy for Derby and for Rolls-Royce. And, it's really important to say to the House, Mr Speaker, this was a fair and open competition, conducted at arm's length from ministers. Rolls-Royce came out as the winner. I'm obviously incredibly pleased that it came out as a winner. And, I think the possibilities are huge, actually, for Rolls-Royce. Huge in terms of what it can do for SMRs in this country, but also the export opportunities and the jobs in the supply chains. And this is the thing about nuclear, is it's not just the jobs at the top of the tree, if you like, but it's the jobs right across the supply chain that we have the potential to create.
Sir Roger Gay.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. While I fear that the development of Sizewell C may prove to be a multi-billion-pound investment in yesterday's technology, I do welcome the commitment to SMRs insofar as it goes, which I believe is probably the way forward for tomorrow. We have to get from where we are today to there. Why are we going to spend billions of pounds and accumulate masses of carbon wastage, importing carbon fuels from overseas, instead of developing our own North Sea resources?
Well, look, I think on the sort of nuclear point, what I'd say to him is, I think there is real potential at Sizewell, and I understand his views or the implication of his views on this, to learn from what happened at Hinkley, because it's a replica of Hinkley, and therefore to cut the costs and do it quicker. I mean, the aim absolutely is to deliver it cheaper and faster. On the sort of wider picture, I think maybe we do have a difference of view. My view is we've got to get off insecure fossil fuels as quickly as possible. That's why nuclear has a role, renewables has a role, but of course also the North Sea, existing fields will be kept open for their lifetime. Oil and gas will continue to play a role in our energy system.
Anna Baxter.
Happy birthday, Mr Speaker. New nuclear has the potential not only to power communities across our country, but create jobs in every constituency, which is why it's particularly extraordinary to hear SNP representatives argue against those jobs. Can the Secretary of State confirm how many new jobs will be created by this announcement today, and what conversations he's had with workplace representatives to make sure they are good jobs, genuinely good jobs, with good terms and conditions?
I think my honourable friend is absolutely right about this in all respects. Sizewell alone is going to create 10,000 jobs at peak, 1,500 apprenticeships. There's a really, for very good safety and other reasons, there's a very strong trade union tradition in the nuclear industry, a tradition that we intend to uphold. And as for the situation in Scotland, it genuinely beggars belief that the SNP would turn their backs on this huge opportunity.
David Mundell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As co-chair of the all-party nuclear group and as somebody who has championed the nuclear industry for 20 years in this Parliament, even when it wasn't popular on both sides, I very much welcome this announcement, because I've seen in my own constituency over 60 years the economic impact the Chapel Cross nuclear power station has had. But returning to the subject of Scotland, obviously we see the SNP intransigence, which is costing Scotland jobs on the nuclear front. Can the Secretary of State ensure that if we're not going to have nuclear power stations, we can at least have jobs in the supply chain?
Well, I congratulate the right honourable gentleman for his long-standing advocacy on this issue, including when it wasn't popular. And I think he makes a very, very good point. Is that we obviously have to have a change in government in Scotland for a Labour Party that will actually advocate and is going to advocate for nuclear, but absolutely. The supply chain in all four nations of the UK can play a crucial role in this nuclear renaissance we're announcing today.
Adam Thompson.
And a very happy birthday to you today. Can I thank the Secretary of State for today's announcement, which represents a massive boost for jobs for my constituents in Erewash and a huge vote of confidence for Rolls-Royce just down the road in Derby. How does the Secretary of State foresee this announcement affecting the availability of apprenticeships for kids leaving my local schools in Ilkeston and Long Eaton?
Well, I think my honourable friend raises such an important point, and there is a really good tradition of apprenticeships in nuclear. I've seen it at Hinkley Point C. We're going to see it at Sizewell. I'm sure, and I will make sure that we see it in the SMR programme as well. And these are fantastic opportunities for young people and opportunities that we intend to make happen.
Adrian Ramsey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could the Secretary of State tell the House a bit more about the regulated asset-based funding model for Sizewell C? And in particular, could he assure the public that the construction phase of Sizewell C won't be funded by increases to people's bills, given that it will be well over a decade, and if we look at Hinkley Point, potentially nearer 2 decades, before it's producing any new electricity?
Well, he will know that the RAB system that was passed through this House involves the role of bill payers. Now, we believe this is the right system. This is actually going to be the thing that cuts the cost compared to Hinkley Point C. And I do say to the honourable gentleman, you know, he appears to oppose many different forms of clean power. He opposes transmission or infrastructure for offshore wind and solar. He opposes solar farms. He opposes CCS. I guess he opposes nuclear. You know, I have an all of the above position on clean energy. He seems to have a none of the above position.
Jonathan Hind.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm delighted that Rolls-Royce has been selected to deliver SMRs in the UK, and it really is time for us to stop delaying the new fleet of nuclear power stations more broadly. The Secretary of State will remember that he came to my constituency, to the Barnet-Noltwick Rolls-Royce site before the election, and he heard that they are now supporting 400 jobs, where pre-pandemic it was 900. This is a huge opportunity for us to create good skilled jobs in all parts of the country. So can he reassure me that the government, as the customer of Rolls-Royce, will, the customer of Rolls-Royce will demand that those jobs are going to places like Barnet-Noltwick all over the UK, and we stop the offshoring of manufacturing?
Well, I was incredibly impressed by what I saw at Barnsleywick, and you know, I was obviously very had to maintain a position of neutrality when I became Secretary of State on the competition as to who won the competition. But I'm obviously incredibly pleased that Rolls-Royce has been the fair and square competition winner. And my honourable friend makes a really important point about making sure the jobs go to places like Barnsleywick, and I'm sure that's something Rolls-Royce will want to do.
Sir Gavin Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Capula is an example of a great British company based in Stone that's been supplying the electricity generation industry in this country for many decades. How can businesses such as Capula really link in at the very earliest stages with the government as it starts to plan how this investment is going to be made so we can get the very best for British jobs?
Good question.
Well, I really thank the right honourable gentleman for his question, and I think he raises a very, very important issue, and let me take this away, which is, as we embark on this golden age for nuclear, we need to make sure that the supply chain really benefits. And perhaps he could furnish my department with details of the company, and we can think about sort of companies like that and how can they benefit.
Elsie Blunt.
Speaker, and I welcome today's announcement. I've been speaking to people from across my constituency, cleaners, hospitality workers and others, who desperately need the cost of bills to come down. How will the projects announced today and other steps this government is taking to counter the impact of uncertainty in global energy markets help stop people in Hayward and Middleton North from being out of pocket?
Well, I think my honourable friend raises a really, really important point, which is, you know, this is about planning for the long term to get off this roller coaster of fossil fuels, which are insecure. And, you know, we saw what happened when Russia invaded Ukraine. Just to give you one fact for the House, Mr. Speaker, if the Sizewell C plant had been up and running at the time of that crisis, bill payers would have saved £4 billion in their bills in 1 year alone in 2022-23. This is the security that new nuclear can give us.
Tom Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and happy birthday as well. I'd like to ask the Secretary of State what guarantees are in place to make sure that these jobs go to local people rather than overseas contractors, and what investment and training and skills will be provided to make sure that those go to local people on the ground.
Well, the Honourable Gentleman raises an important point that members on both sides of the House have in different ways raised. And look, it is absolutely part of what we are going to do to make sure these jobs come to the UK. There's commitments around 70% of the supply chain spending being in the UK. But it is something where my department will ensure there is accountability of the companies who are going to be benefiting from public money to make sure that we see absolutely maximum benefits in the UK and across the country.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I warmly welcome the Secretary of State's statement today. Unfortunately, it's not for viewers in Scotland. Scotland was once a pioneer in nuclear energy and should be again, but due to the SNP Scottish Government's outdated, backward, quite frankly bizarre opposition to nuclear energy, turning away billions of pounds of investment and thousands of high-skilled jobs. So does the Secretary of State agree with me? This is yet another way the SNP Scottish Government has lost their way.
My honourable friend is so right about this, and I think people in Scotland will be looking at these announcements and saying, well, why isn't it us that are benefiting from this? Why are we not even in the race? You know, we've got lots of people in this House, lots of members in this House saying, we want my area to benefit, we want my area to benefit, and we've got a Scottish Government and an SNP that says, we want no part of it. We want no part of these jobs. That, Mr. Speaker, makes no sense.
Samuel Wilson. Speaker, and can I also welcome, it's very unusual for me to welcome anything from the Secretary of State, and I welcome this announcement today because nuclear is an important element in providing the base load for electricity across the United Kingdom. But while the Minister has mentioned deliver 5 times in a statement, this is an announcement, not a delivery, and there is a period when we will still need base load to be provided. And can he tell us how he intends to ensure that the base load is provided in that interim period, and also what discussions he had with the Minister for the Economy in Northern Ireland to see the suitability of SMRs to the supply in Northern Ireland?
Well, the Honourable Gentleman and I have been discussing these energy issues for about 17 years, I think, since he was the spokesperson, and agreement is rare between us. So I really welcome the agreement. Look, what I'd say to him is these are the steps we've got to go through to deliver, and they're incredibly important. On the point about the Minister in Northern Ireland, my honourable friend, the Energy Minister, is going to be meeting the next week. Just to reassure him on that point. And look, we believe this absolutely can benefit all 4 nations of the United Kingdom. That is 100% our intention to make that happen.
Andrew MacDonald.
Happy birthday, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the Government's commitment to securing our future energy supply, and by doing so taking back control of our energy, protecting family finances and tackling the climate crisis. But in addition, I'm keen to learn of the Department's assessment of new technological developments to reduce energy waste, and in particular through developing underground thermal energy storage solutions. I'm aware of organisations in that sector keen to share opportunities with the Government, and I therefore ask the Secretary of State what is his assessment of the role of thermal storage solutions in reducing energy loss, avoiding curtailment fees, and maximising the benefit from energy generated.
Well, I know my honourable friend, and I thank him for his question, has been strongly advocating on these issues in terms of his constituency and the exciting possibilities that there are. My suggestion is that perhaps the Minister for Energy from my department meets with him and the company concerned about the potential that there could be.
The announcement today is good news as far as it goes, but the base load that it will provide won't be on tap for many, many years to come. How does he propose to fill that gap? And will he now look again at the UK-Morocco power project, which needs a decision soon and could be delivering electrons by the turn of the decade? And does the announcement today affect the likely contract for difference and strike price that's eventually reached with the proposed operator?
Well, look, I can say to him that we are very seriously looking at the X-Links projects, and he is a tireless advocate for that project, and I do respect him for that. Look, my answer on the base load question is that we need a combination of things to meet the power that we need, and there's all kinds of different ways in which we can do that. I would also say that part of the job that we're undertaking is to make sure that we can get Hinkley Point C delivered as quickly as possible, because that can also make an important contribution. On the last point that he makes, the decisions today don't affect decisions on X-Links. These are separate decisions.
Graham Stringer.
Can I welcome the Secretary's statement today, which is moving towards an energy mix which is less weather dependent. I also welcome the Secretary's of State announcement of investment in nuclear fusion. There is one constant about nuclear fusion, which is from the original ideas in the 1950s. It's always been 50 years in the future. The International Energy Agency are still predicting that the earliest energy fusion will be providing energy into a grid in the second half of this century. Does the Energy Secretary agree with that? And if not, why not?
Well, he's definitely right about the old sort of saying about nuclear fusion. I mean, I think maybe it's coming a bit closer. There have been really important breakthroughs, including in the UK, or particularly in the UK, and look, we are determined to invest in them. I don't think anyone can say for certain when it will arrive, but I think the prototype fusion project is a really exciting step on that journey.
Ms Savile Roberts.
Penblwydd hapus i chi. Happy birthday. The nuclear community at Trasfynydd remains disappointed not to be on GBN's SMR site and will continue to push for that, but also for alternative uses. Security of supply of medical radioisotopes is critical to avoid the ethical nightmare of rationing diagnoses and treatments for a range of diseases, including cancer. Welsh Government's Project Arthur will see North Wales become the home of a public sector national laboratory to produce medical radioisotopes. What is his department doing to help Welsh Government to realise Project Arthur at Trasfynydd?
Well, this is why these statements are important. I think I need to check the answer. I don't want to give a flippant answer to the Honourable Lady's incredibly serious question, so let me write to her to give her a proper answer.
Lillian Jones.
Thank you and happy birthday, Mr Speaker. Whilst I welcome this fantastic announcement, unfortunately Scotland won't benefit due to the SNP's ideological block on nuclear power, blocking billions in investment, blocking thousands of well-paid secure Scottish jobs and blocking growth across our Scottish communities. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that Scotland, and indeed Ayrshire, needs a new political direction, and the only way to get that is at the ballot box next year?
Well, my honourable friend puts it very well, and I noticed the SNP sort of disappeared because they're a bit embarrassed, probably. She's absolutely right about this, and in a sense it comes into sharp focus today because we can announce a golden age of nuclear with our investments, but not in Scotland. Because of the position of the SNP government, it makes no sense.
Dr Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and happy birthday. Mr Speaker, energy security is very important, and so I welcome today's investment in nuclear. One small modular reactor can power 1 million homes using just 2 square football pitches of land. Yet you need 2,000 acres of good quality farmland with solar on it to produce just the energy for 50,000 homes. So will the right honourable gentleman consider the importance of food security as well as energy security and reconsider the use of good quality farmland for solar and concentrate instead on producing nuclear?
Well, I should say to the Honourable Lady that we're operating under the planning guidance of the previous government on best agricultural land, and just on her sort of wider point, I would say we need all of these clean energy resources at our disposal. We need solar, we need onshore wind, we need offshore wind, we need nuclear. I'm for all of the above.
I just want to inform the House that the Government will be bringing a statement later today on an update of the Middle East. Right, Jonathan Davis.
Mr Speaker. Today's announcement that £2.5 billion has been invested in the small modular reactor programme is fantastic news for the country because it will help bring energy bills down, power homes and create jobs. But it's amazing news for Derby too, because the technology that's behind the SMRs has its roots in what in the technology which was developed at Rolls-Royce submarines over half a century ago. So as the government moves forward with this investment and delivery, can I ask him, as he approaches the contractual aspects, to make sure that we can build on things that we've got in Derby, like the Nuclear Skills Academy and the good jobs that are already there, so that we can grow the opportunity for the wider region and indeed the country as a whole?
I think my honourable friend puts it incredibly well. I think Derby should be incredibly proud of Rolls-Royce winning the competition, and I think incredibly excited about the possibilities there are now for young people in Derby, indeed people right across Derby, and indeed in the wider region. Now we must make sure that working with Rolls-Royce we deliver on this promise, and that's what we intend to do.
Yes. Yeah. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The member for Waverley Valley asked some perfectly reasonable and pertinent questions about the cost of this whole project. Is there a PFI element involved in this? Is the private finance going into it as well? What will be the cost of it? What will be the cost and ultimate disposal of the nuclear waste? And who will pay, ultimately, in 60 years' time, for the decommissioning costs of this? Because the nuclear industry does not have a great record on either strike price or on decommissioning costs or on the costs of dealing with waste.
The right honourable gentleman asked perfectly legitimate questions. On the decommissioning side of things, I'm glad to say that in the financing model that has been produced, decommissioning is in at the beginning as part of the overall costs that have been laid out. On the question about total costs, we will lay those out on final investment decision. Similarly, when it comes to the RAB cost to bill payers, all I can say to him as somebody who I know genuinely cares about the climate crisis is all of the evidence we have is that this is our least cost alternative compared to the alternative low carbon technologies. So it's a crucial part of the energy mix.
Govinda Singh Joseph.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Firstly, may I congratulate the Secretary of State and this Labour Government on this incredibly important investment announcement today. As a physicist by training, I particularly welcome the investment in fusion technology as well as the traditional fission, and I'm sure this investment will make that a final outcome closer. Will the Secretary of State ensure that the benefits of this investment is felt across all our communities by ensuring a predominantly UK supply chain? And will he ensure all aspects of the nuclear jigsaw receive government support, including provision of nuclear fuel, decommissioning, safe disposal of nuclear waste products, and even the reuse of nuclear waste products that are currently stockpiled in future generations of reactors?
I think my honourable friend, Madam Deputy Speaker, makes a really important point, which is that across the life cycle of nuclear, there are important economic opportunities, and across the supply chain, there are important economic opportunities. And it's a constant theme of the questions that we've had today, which is the importance of realising that potential, and that's what we intend to do.
Blake Stevens.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Global tech giants like Microsoft and Amazon have announced plans to use SMRs to power their data centres. So they have trust in SMRs. I happen to believe that it should be the future of nuclear in this country. A couple of questions for the Secretary of State. In this announcement, a new public company will be set up, GB Energy Nuclear. Could the Secretary of State set out why a new company is required, how much it will cost the public purse, and why it's based in Warrington? I have nothing wrong with Warrington, of course, but why has the decision been taken to base that in Warrington? And also, could the Secretary of State outline when we would expect meaningful deployment of these modular reactors in the UK?
He asked good questions. On the first question, this is a development from Great British Nuclear. Great British Energy Nuclear is a development of that organisation, which is currently based in Warrington. On deployment, I sort of aware of the record of people promising deployment and then it not being delivered. Look, the truth is that we're expecting final investment decision in the next few years. And then deployment in the early to mid 2030s, I think is the fairest way to put it. But I agree with him about the potential there is, and I also agree with him, by the way, which is why I'm said I'm open to the role of the private sector, that there may be private sector partners who want to come in and build sooner, and that would be great.
Luke Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I refer to my register of members' interest. Can I welcome this investment in both our energy security and jobs. I know from my own visit to Sizewell with the Energy Security and Net Zero Select Committee that the jobs in the nuclear industry are well paid, high skilled, good jobs. And does the Secretary of State agree that this is in part because of the strong relationship between business, trade unions and the government in the sector, and that there is actually much to be learned from this relationship in other parts of the energy sector and beyond?
I think my honourable friend characteristically puts it incredibly well, which is I do think that the nuclear industry offers us a model of good employee relations and a good strong role for trade unions, but both ensuring safety and guaranteeing good terms and conditions for workers. And I think it's a lesson that other parts of the energy industry, including the renewables sector, can definitely learn from.
Richard Ford.
Madam Deputy Speaker, new jobs in clean energy are really very welcome. And what we've seen at Hinkley C in the southwest is that many of the skilled jobs are going to young people from beyond the area. Given social mobility challenges in East Anglia and in West Somerset, can the Minister comment on investment in colleges and skills to encourage applications for these new jobs and apprenticeships from the local area?
Good.
If I may say so, I think the honourable gentleman puts it incredibly well. And that certainly was my impression when I went to Hinkley Point C, is seeing the impact it has on the local economy, and we want to do the same at Sizewell C as well. And there is plans to set up a local college, in a way modelling some of the stuff that was done at Hinkley Point C. So I think he's so right about the massive opportunities there are here, and opportunities that we must exploit.
Mark Ferguson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, as a child, Sizewell was an important word to me, as was Wilfer, as was Hunterston, Dungeness, Dounreay and Hinkley, because they were places that my father, based in Gateshead, went to work. Can he assure me that this announcement today will be part of bringing back those fantastic, safe jobs that are so important for Gateshead in the nuclear industry?
Well, I'm really glad my honourable friend asked this question and talked about his sort of heritage and family history on this. I think it reflects something really real, which is there's been a great tradition of the nuclear industry in this country. It went through a sort of extended hiccup, I think it is fair to say. And it is really important that we are bringing it back. These are good, long-term, secure jobs and jobs that people take real pride in, and we should absolutely embrace that.
James Nash.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the Chair of the APPG for Fusion Energy and the Chair of the APPG for the East Midlands, a huge thank you on behalf of my constituents in my region for these two major announcements today, Rolls-Royce winning the SMR contract and the £2.5 billion for Fusion Energy. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that these large infrastructure projects offer huge apprenticeship and job opportunities for my region? And will he commit to meeting me and Claire Ward, the Mayor of the East Midlands, to discuss how the Ratcliffe-on-Soar power station can play its role?
Well, I congratulate my honourable friend on his sort of two-hatted advocacy on these issues, and I think it is really important point that he makes. You know, the potential of the new prototype fusion plant is huge, the wider potential of nuclear is huge, and I look forward to having discussions with him about this.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. First of all, can I thank the Secretary of State very much for his statement and for his clear positivity in every word that he put forward today. We're very welcome to hear the news and look forward to how we can all benefit across this great nation. I very much welcome the news that nuclear energy is to be secured for the United Kingdom and also for the job security and many contracts available. So can the Secretary of State confirm that companies from the United Kingdom will have secure contracts and supply materials and manpower? And how can government ensure that each area of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland can benefit and will benefit from this massive investment? Thank you so much.
I thank the honourable gentleman, and look, it is really important that there is a four nations approach to the supply chain contracts that they have, and that's something that I'm very keen to ensure. There are going to be thousands of contracts in the supply chain, huge opportunities for Northern Ireland, and I'm determined that we deliver them.
Final question, Paul Wall.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Andy Burnham's Atom Valley Merrill Development Zone for Advanced Manufacturing is going to be based in Rochdale, Oldham and Bury, and it's so named in honour of Ernest Rutherford's groundbreaking research at the University of Manchester in splitting the atom. So does my honourable friend welcome the fact that today's huge public investment in both nuclear but also nuclear fusion will rely on precisely the kind of research, cutting-edge research, that will be done at the Sustainable Manufacturing and Materials Centre in Rochdale?
Well, I congratulate my honourable friend on that question and on the new centre, which is incredibly appropriately named. And look, we should really celebrate our history on these issues. And the way to honour our history is by building the future for nuclear. And that's what today, Madam Deputy Speaker, is all about.
That's the end of the statement. I'll give the front benches a few moments to point of order, Paul Holmes.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker.